Good evening and welcome to the Control Option Press Box. Frank Cusumano with you until 7 o'clock. We got a great roundtable. How about Bob Sundvold's career, winning the program's first conference championship in 2022, winning the first regional title in 50 years, going to the Elite Eight in 2023, 3 Sweet 16 appearances in 4 years, and he's UMSL's all-time leader in wins. Boy, you've done some pretty good coaching lately.
Yeah, Frank, nobody says that very often, so that's nice to hear. Thanks.
We have Rich Grauer, arguably the greatest high school coach St. Louis has ever known, and then a tremendous 10-year run at SLU. Coach, good to be with you. How are you?
I'm fine, Frank. Thank you.
And we have Mark Benson with us, who, if you're not a football fan, you may not know the name, but he was one of the great coaches of his generation, a state title at Valley, a lot of winning at Prairie. Mark, great to be with you. How are you?
Thanks. I'm doing great, Frank.
All right, let's talk right off the bat. Do you think, and Bob, you would be the first person to answer this, do you think that kids are different or parents are different right now as opposed to maybe 15 years ago?
Parents. Now, I think part of it is their expectations change, and I think kids are brought up different from the standpoint of youth basketball, the amount of money that parents are needing to pay for training, AAU travel. So what happens is when a player gets into high school, I think there's some real expectations made by the parents, and they may be false expectations. But once we get a guy in college, they still want to be coached. And for the most part, the successful guys want to be coached, as that phrase, coached hard, meaning, hey, we tell you about your problems, your what you got to get better at, and we give you critique, and we try to improve you. And that hasn't changed. I think good players, great players, really want to coach, working with them, helping them. And then we have some other guys that they're not going to win for their team, and you're going to see them transfer for different reasons other than the portal. But there's just different things. But I want to say it goes back to how are these kids brought up, and what are their parents' expectations, and then how much of the lean is that on the kids? Mark,
what about from your perspective? You have a grandson who's a terrific athlete, and you also dealt with these parents at Valley and at Prairie. Tell me what your take is.
Well, first of all, I dealt with parents 40-plus years ago, so that's quite a while ago. But I have 8 grandchildren, and most of them are in sports like what Bob's talking about, and I just marvel at going to these various facilities. There's 1,000 people there, and it costs a lot of money. And a couple of my daughters, I joke with them. I say, "You guys have become parents that I used to not like when I was a coach." My daughters are becoming that way, and I'm always asking, please taper it down a little bit. But I agree with what you're saying, Bob. It's the parents more so than the kids.
Coach.
Well, when I was coaching, if a kid didn't, or a kid complained, or a parent complained, I simply would say, well, all right, we'll take away the scholarship. And that usually quieted them down. Nowadays, if you say that, that's kind of a cue for them to go into the portal and search for a better place. Yeah. So times have changed from that aspect. But again, I think I've got 19 grandkids, and they all play sports, one type or another, and most of them have gotten into these clubs. Soccer clubs, and my wife and I marvel at how much money our daughters or sons are spending to keep these kids in these clubs, always with the expectation that these clubs are going to elevate them to the point where they're going to be able to play whatever sport it is in college. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't happen that way. The money that they've spent on soccer clubs with my one daughter, it's not happening.
Hey, Frank, what about, real quick, I thought of this. What about Lafayette High School this year in the Final Four? In the boys' Final Four.
They pulled the stunt?
And the kids don't go play.
Yeah.
Because
people don't know it, they were in the Final Four, and they have a chance to win a state championship, and about 5 or 6 players went on spring break instead of playing in that semifinal state game. Is that incredible?
So it's unheard of, I could say 50 years ago when I played. I mean, that was unheard of. First off, we didn't have spring break because you get basketball and you went right into track and field. And then the other thing is, like during Christmas breaks, you have some schools will have it be in a tournament, and you go watch, and all of a sudden you're looking like, man, they're missing like 3 players. Oh, the family had a Christmas vacation or a Christmas trip. And so that's not on the kids. No, the players, I mean, obviously they could have maybe said, hey, I can stay with a friend, I can stay with another family, I'm playing in that tournament, but that's a weird way of looking things.
I remember when Bob McCormick first started at Ladue, and I said, "Where's your center during the Christmas holidays?" "Well, he's in the Caribbean." I go, "What?"
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the way it is. But I will say this on the individual teaching. I think that's a great thing for parents. And I know sometimes it's kind of expensive, but to give your son or daughter to someone else where you don't have to be the coach, parent, teacher, and all that, and maybe it's good for the relationship, and maybe that person is better than you at doing that. What's your take there?
You know, Frank, I would make an observation that I have a grandson who's a sophomore in high school, and he played point guard on the varsity basketball team and second base on the varsity baseball team, both pretty good teams. But during the summers, a lot of these kids will go to these select baseball programs. They'll leave town like on a Monday or Tuesday, be out of town all week through the weekend. As both you guys said, costs a lot of money. But another thing that happens that I think's not good is we have a phenomenal weight training program at our school. AJ Afadale runs it.
Former Mizzou star, NFL player.
And AJ and I have talked about it, that these kids are then missing the foundational piece that would really help them. And that's kind of sad.
You mean the weight training part.
Exactly. Yeah. So you'd think, I mean, that's a base thing that everybody in any sport they can utilize, and they miss that.
You know, parents, the parents that put their kids into these programs, I still think they complain and bitch a lot about it.
Yeah.
Especially if their son or daughter is not making the progress that they hoped they would make. And they're not getting the play from colleges that they think they deserve to get because they played in these select programs. So I don't think, I don't think it's all the fact that the parents are happy with these programs. They pay their money, but they still complain. And again, the chances of players going from elite soccer to college soccer, players going from elite basketball to college basketball, they're minute. I mean, the odds are just tremendously low, and I'm not so certain the kids might not be better to stay under their high school coach and learn from them, because those coaches are usually pretty good.
If it's a strong program.
Yeah.
Our oldest son was a swimmer, a very accomplished swimmer, swam at the University of Missouri. But I remember when I became the bad parent for the rest of the swim club was he was 10 years old, and we're at a swim meet, and I hear moms and behind me and dads, and and Bobby does well, and they go, he could be an Olympian. I got up, I walked over, I took my newspapers, because it's like 7 a.m. on a Sunday, when they're running their meets, and I go sit in the corner, and my wife Denise comes up. "That's rude. Now, why are you doing that?" I said, "I will never be sitting by parents the rest of my parenting career if this is how it's going to go." But I knew, no, he's not going to be an Olympian. No, we're living in Missouri. This isn't going to happen. I mean, there's a certain level of what each person can do, and you have to have a recognition of it. And I think that's where, the training's great. And the basketball coaching in St. Louis is fantastic. And there are some really terrific trainers. You know what? One of my players, Matt Enright, is one of those guys. Yeah. And they do a great job. But there's a limit. You can't put it on that guy to say, okay, he should get to the NBA because he's working with him,
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm wondering, in terms of like setting the guidelines, like Mike Matheny has just written a book about this, about his experience, and he was coaching young baseball players before he became the Cardinal manager. He came out with the Matheny Manifesto, where he's like, let every parent know these are the rules and stay out and don't talk to me, when we're right after a game, like a 24-hour rule. Boy, I think you just got to establish those guidelines early.
Yeah, I've done a bunch of clinics for grade school coaches, and grade school parents sometimes are the worst. I mean, they don't know much about the sport that their son or daughter is playing in, and they complain a lot. But I tell the coaches, the first thing you must do is have a parent meeting and lay down in written form and give the parents this written form about the rules and expectations for your team. For example, just a simple thing. You don't talk to me after a game. If you have a problem, you wait till the next day and give me a call. So, rules like that. So parents' expectations are certainly, they know what they are.
Yeah. And you've probably had some really unrealistic parents at UMSL. And you wouldn't think they try to get to the college coach, but they have, correct?
Well, I've not had, it's kind of strange, but I think because when you start getting a little age, they're not sure if they're supposed to talk to you or if you're accessible. And I'm not real accessible, honestly. So they've got to go through a couple assistants before they get to me after a game. And so I've had two horrible experiences, and that was at UMKC. One, we won the greatest game we'd won we beat Homer Drew for the first time from Valparaiso in a long time. And I'm walking out, and I have a parent waiting for me in the parking garage. And all she wants to do is know why her son only played 17 minutes. And, I just said, Sharon, you're going to have to call me on Monday. I'm not equipped to talk to you right now. And, I mean, she followed me.
So Mrs. Stricker, was that nasty?
That was not Mrs. Stricker. By the way, Earl Stricker was one of the great parents of all time when I had Mark, yeah.
How many times do you think my dad ever talked to you about basketball at DeSmet?
I don't think ever. Never. No, he didn't.
Never, yeah.
And those are the parents that you appreciate. I remember in recruiting Anthony Bonner at SLU, Isaac Bonner, his dad, big burly guy, cab driver, down-to-earth person. His mom, Rosetta, the same. When I went into their home, they basically, in front of Anthony sitting there, when I went in to recruit him, they basically said, Coach, we give you 100% support. You do what you have to do to keep this kid in line. If you have to yell at him, if you have to scream at him, if you have to punish him for being later, we are going to support you 100%. And for 4 years, they followed that.
Coach, did you have any problems with parents, or back then they just didn't even think about approaching a coach who's won state titles?
I would say that was not as likely back then as today. But, yeah, we had some. But I learned something from Don Shula, who I read this in a book, and he made the comment that, like I'm 71 years old, so when I was a kid, if we ask a coach or a parent why we have to do this, the answer was because I said so. And Don Shula communicated he didn't think that was really the way to go. Now, this was in the 80s. And so every year I met with our mothers. I met with the dads. I showed game film to dads every week. And then, of course, I met with the players. And in the opening session, each time, I tried to explain to the group, I said, we really, as a coaching staff, try really hard to have reasons why we do things. And, whether it's our weight training program, we know on Tuesday night what we're going to do on third down, or we know what we're going to do on the goal line, et cetera. And we try to have reasons why. So here's what I'd like to say. If you ask me at the right time and in the right manner, and it's not a confidential matter, I'll answer it. I'll give you the why. Now, I don't expect you to agree with me, but I owe you a why. And there were 3 or 4 times that there were challenges, and that simple. 3 or 4 times people came in to me, they were really upset, and I would always calmly say, look, remember the rule, if you ask me at the right time, in the right manner, we'll have a conversation. I'd always say, this is the right time, but you're not asking in the right manner. And that was really effective.
That's good stuff. All right. Good. We have Mark Benson with us, Bob Sundvold, Rich Grauer. This is the Control Option Press Box on the Big 550 KTRS. Welcome back to the Control Option Press Box on the Big 550 KTRS. Mark Benson, former football coach, Bob Sundvold, present basketball coach, and Rich Grauer, former basketball coach, joining us. All right, let's talk a little about NIL. I had Coach Schertz on the radio the other day, and I thought this was kind of interesting. He will not have a player playing for free anymore at St. Louis University. So even if you're the 11th man on a mid-major at SLU, you're going to make some good money.
That's amazing to me, but I'm sure that's the way it is. And that's why I'm very interested, Bob, in the mechanics of going into the portal, the mechanics of how a kid gets into the portal. And what your recruiting pitch is now to kids, my theory was I looked at the Final Four, and obviously that's a kind of a weird way to do it, but Houston, Florida, and who was the third team? Not Duke. Houston, Florida, and whoever the third team was.
Auburn, wasn't it?
Oh, was it Auburn? Yeah. I looked at their roster. 80% of the minutes played the previous year were back on their team. So my theory, Bob, would be that the first priority of any coach is to try to keep the players that you have, especially the ones that are good, on your team. And they're the ones that you have to keep. So how do you keep them at Division II when they're enticed with all this money from Division I? That's the question.
Well, so we had a lot of guys back from last year's team.
Yeah.
Last year's team went 13-16. And I think a lot of them had maybe a mentality of we weren't good enough and I'm not good enough. Well, then you spin it, and now you turn your season around, and next year you're going to the Sweet 16, and now there's a little bit of that, hey, we're good, I must be good, and so I should really explore my options. You asked about the mechanics. The mechanics are such that a player and his coach do not have to be involved in the portal. The player goes in the portal by going through the compliance officer at the athletic department. So we have a gal, Jessica Chandler. So our players can call her, they can email her, they can meet her in person, and they can say, I want to go in the portal. And then she triggers it. And then what they do then afterwards is they create their own little social media presentation of, hey, God bless America, God bless UMSL, and I'm going to the portal. I appreciate everything. And then they'll have all their video that they want to put out, and they can do whatever they want to do. But we really have they put the coaches in a spot where we don't do anything with it. Now, fortunately, I feel good in that Troy Glover, who went in the portal, is going to go to Bowling Green, big Division I move for him. He came in and talked to me. Now, I had a conversation with him a year ago, though. He had people talking to him, and I said, if you come back next year, play your junior year, I can promise you're going to have a better deal than you're getting.
Bob, let me stop you because I saw you guys play 3 or 4 times. And for those who don't know, Troy Glover is, 6'9", 6'10", very athletic, maybe needs some development offensively.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
He probably needs a little bit more offensive moves to help himself, but still, he's a very valuable player.
Yeah, he's a defensive player of the year in our league, and set a shot blocking record in the league, shot blocking record for the school, and does what certain schools are looking for. You know, we put him on the baseline. They call it the dunker spot now.
Yeah.
And we had some really good guards, including Matt Enright and Manuel Prosper, and they made plays for him, and he's dunking 5 balls a game late in the year. And that triggers, film, so people are watching.
Yeah. Did your 2 players that left, are they in 6 figures now at Division I spots, you think?
I don't know. Prosper has a 5th year because he went to junior college, so they put in a new rule this year. So Emmanuel is still checking his options, and he visited Central Michigan earlier in the week. He's at Cal San Diego right now. I don't know where his number is, and I don't know whether to believe it.
But the 2 players you lost,
but we
already
lost Troy, and we heard Troy's in 6 figures. We lost Matt Enright to Austin Peay, and I'm not sure about his numbers, but word on the street is did very well.
What do you think about that? The players making that kind of money. Obviously, the money is there. Do you have a problem with it, Mark?
I don't. No, I mean, I think it's great. I guess on one hand, I can't imagine, Rich, how you would have coped in that kind of a environment. Bob, I wanted to ask you something. I know a guy, Tim Spiker, who was a point guard at WashU back in the 90s. His brother is the head basketball coach at Drexel. Do you know a Coach Spiker at Drexel?
I know Drexel. I'm not sure.
I'm talking to Tim just last week, and he made the comment that his brother was thinking he's going to come out pretty well with the portal as far as losing people. And then I was asking him this morning, his brother in the last week has lost 4 kids to Providence, Butler, Florida State, and Indiana. And my question to you, does that change how you recruit? Does it change how you develop? I mean, what do you do? What would that coach at Drexel do strategically going forward?
Well, so he's going to strategically start watching Division II regional tournaments. His staff's going to start looking at those. He's going to start looking at lower Division I postseason teams or whatever. The thing we've had to do, and I go back 5 years on this, where they came out and said players are going to have free transfer. Okay, and we got a little cabin down at Table Rock Lake. And I remember when that came out, I go, wow, kids can go anywhere and not sit out. And that is going to be the Wild West. But then I thought, okay, there's 2 ways to go. I can either be the angry old guy that's been coaching and, harumph. Yeah. That's not how they did it back in, or I just go, okay, I'll help the guys. I'll help the players. And like it or not, what you then became is, instead of a coach like Rich Grauer or Mark, who you love being around your players for 4 years because you were seeing a transformation from a young guy to a dang adult and now doing great, making great decisions, we now are not getting that. We're not going to get to. I wanted to see Matt Enright one more year just to see how great he was going to be. We had him talking more at the end of the season, but we don't get to do that. So now what we are is we're transactional. We go, okay, let's try to coach this year. Let's see.
Is there going to be a chance you're going to get kids who will feel confident coming to you just for a couple years and then moving on
Sure.
because going to have the attitude
and
that
how
that's
much
okay.
it'll help you if D2 years don't count, which the NCAA is considering.
Yeah, well, if the thing we do, we had we had a 6'8" guy in earlier this week with his dad. He's an NAIA player, and I told him, I said, I want you to think of us as your G League stop.
There you go.
Okay, you come in, we're going to work on your skills. We're going to get you better, because that's what Troy Glover did. Okay. And Troy got better at this. He got better at that. Well, you're better at certain areas than Troy was already, so you could work on this. And then, you know what? A year from now, if you and your dad want to come back in the office, you want to talk about what's next, what's the option, hey, we're all for it. And so we're just trying to get, the best players we can maybe attract to our level and stay competitive in a great league. And then the other thing is just maybe something will happen while they're there that it'll catch where a Matt Enright will stay 3 years. You know, we're starting to talk now like, hey, if a guy stays 3, that'd really be unbelievable, you know?
Yeah, 2 years would probably be the max that you should hope for.
Yeah, if they're good. Now, there's a rule coming out, maybe the NCAA may go to just 5 years straight up, no redshirting, no medical, no hardships. You get 5 years to play. But I'm not for that, because my thought is, hey, if you're a bad player, you're not going to stick around 5 years. If you're a good player, you're not going to stick around 5 years. So it's really, I would like it to stay at 4 years. If you get a medical problem, fine. Redshirt problem, good. But let's try to keep it similar. The other thing that we have to do is we have to build our roster in a way that we get a freshman or 2 or 3 that want to get better. And then maybe they'll get better, but they can't move yet. And then the sophomore year, they're going to get to play a little more. And then maybe they even say, hey, maybe I'm like the other guy. I should stay 1 more year. And so you still want that base of guys, but you got to find the right ones. And the ones that you think can invest and be a part of the campus and enjoy being there and look forward to year 2 and year 3 and whatever.
Are there Division II schools, Bob, that do have NIL money?
Yes.
In your league, even?
Really? I was told by our AD, Holly said nobody in our league has NIL.
Just again, for people out there, UMSL's in a heck of a good conference.
Yeah, we're in a really
Who are
good
some of the teams?
That's the best D2 conference in America, isn't
Us
it?
and the MIAA are really strong. And you know, there's a group in Florida that's great. Now, Nova Southeastern has won a bunch of titles. They have a great NIL package for D2. They've got a couple of boosters and alums that run the Publix grocery, and they're kicking in. So we know about. I mean, like really, if Nova comes up on a radar of a guy we're recruiting, we're probably finding another guy.
Do kids ask you, Bob? Do you have any NIL money?
Sure. Yeah,
and you have to be very upfront with them.
Question.
It's the second question. First question is playing time or what?
Coach, where do you see me playing? Do I fit? Yeah, you fit. Hey, do you have NIL? No. Is that okay?
Yeah. And as we speak, have you ever been in a situation where it's May 1st and you have 6 players on the roster?
Oh, easily.
Oh, yeah. You have been there before?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So our Elite 8 year, we brought in 13 new players, and we didn't get 4 of them until July. And it's just the way it is. Now, we're closing on some high school kids right now, freshmen.
Good for you.
Boom, 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 getting them. And then what we're doing is kind of regrouping, because the guys we want, let's say the bigger players, NAIA guy or a 6'8" guy that's other D2 or a low D1 that looks to move, they're still hoping they got an NIL package out there. So there's no reason for us to pester them. Hey, we just put our name out, give them a little spiel, and then, hey, we'll talk to you in a couple weeks. And that's the way we're going to go about it. And I got 2 great assistant coaches. Javis Flynn is fantastic at recognizing and evaluating players, identifying them. And Jamal Nixon's been here 1 year, but they've done a great job. And so that's kind of how we're going to go about it.
That's got to be unbelievably important, right? Is evaluating talent,
identifying first.
You can't be wrong. You can't be wrong on that.
Well, really, you want to identify it first and evaluate it, and then you got to figure out, okay, where does it fit? Where's he fit? And how's the talent and then the mentality? And
so it's kind of a good thing that you don't have to deal with NIL in a sense. I mean, I was with Gates on Monday, Coach Gates at Mizzou, and he said he is going to hire his first ever general manager to handle all that because he doesn't want to deal with it.
Yeah. And I saw Shaquille O'Neal is going to be a general manager at Sacramento State or one of those schools out.
Steph Curry's at Davidson.
That's right.
Woj is at St. Bonaventure.
And they're not doing it for the money. They're doing it because I think they just want to help the program in the school. So every school probably has to have that type of guy. That's a Division I.
I wondered about this. Would it have been, now, Rich, you worked for Norm 1 year.
Right.
And I worked for him a number of years. Would Norm have had a general manager?
No.
But like, isn't the general manager a way now for the AD or the head coach to kind of slide some responsibility and
Sure.
go, I didn't pick all these guys. The GM picked all these guys.
Yeah.
And so when you're in the middle of the league and you're not making the tournament, it's like, I maybe need to change GMs, So it might be a different way for these guys to
It might save some
evaluate.
coaches' jobs.
And it could.
Bob, how many Norm Stewarts would have gotten out of coaching sooner if it was like then?
Well,
like
and I
today?
think you just look recently, Jay Wright gets out and Coach K. I mean, there were those guys have high energy. I mean, they're still doing a lot of stuff. And I don't think it was just the coaching. And you never know background, and maybe Jay long time ago said, hey, I get to age 60, 61, I'm done, or whatever it's going to be. But there is, and I don't compare our level because I don't think we have enough of that strain of 24-hour strain. We have our own based on improving players and trying to get them better. But I think there's a lot going on when you put the NIL.
I still think, Bob, the way you guys recruit gives you more of a personal feel for the kid, to know his character, to know his values, to fit in, rather than
speed dating. That happens now.
Going through the portal where you don't get to talk to counselors, or you don't get to talk to teachers or friends of the kid that you're recruiting, and you make a lot of mistakes that way.
Yeah. Rich, you'd get a kick out of this. So a few years ago, remember when you had the deal, the play hard sheet? Play hard, right?
Yeah.
So a few years ago, and really kind of turned our program, I had a guy on my staff named Jesse Shaw, who's now at Iowa with his teammate Ben McCollum. And Jesse left us and went to Maryville and was the head coach there for 4 years. But Jesse came in and was on our staff. And so we're talking about evaluating players. And I said, we're missing something. And he goes, yeah, you know what, we're missing? Motor. The motor ought to be the number one thing we're looking for to come to UMSL. If they play hard and they got a motor, we got a chance. And it really kind of, we quit worrying about how many rebounds and how many, because, those can all be skewed. But playing hard. All right, now we came up with a new one this year. How can we find a guy that can get through tough stuff without just automatically saying, nah, this ain't for me, I'm gonna go in the portal? And I think so. We have to have we do a better job on the phone with them. We do more questioning, and then we also have a crazy thing like how many questions did he ask us? Javis and I were just talking today about a guy that was on campus. He said, Coach, did he ask you any questions? I said, no. It was weird. He goes, well, he's probably not our guy then. But you got to kind of get through the BS in your quick little visit, and then how do you get him to convey, I'm going to be tough enough to make.
Bob's talking about play hard. What happened to me is at a timeout in one of our games, this is literally in the middle of the game, I called a timeout and I yelled at one of our players and said, you're not playing hard enough. There was a pause and he turned around and said, what do you mean by playing hard? Define it. And I thought, that's probably a good question. Yeah. And so that's when I began to put together a list of things that would indicate if you're playing hard, like running from offense to defense, which sometimes, I said that's a specific thing. Wow. Diving on the floor for a loose ball, etc. So that's what made me motivated to define play hard.
That makes sense.
All right, we got a break. We have Rich Grauer, Mark Benson, Bob Sundvold. This is the Control Option Press Box. And welcome back to the Control Option Press Box on the Big 550 KTRS. Frank Cusumano with Rich Grauer, Bob Sundvold, and Mark Benson, the man who has made Control Option happen. Coach is a customer, a lot of people talking about it around town, and you're trying to go national with it. But kind of explain it in as layman of terms impossible about you being your own personal banker, which I think is really a great concept.
Well, Frank, if it's okay, I'd like to maybe just say it this way. Every industry probably has flaws because there are human beings in the industry. I think we may be talking about that in the sports industry. And so in the financial industry, there's some significant challenges that everybody has. One, there are multiple surveys that say 75 to 92% of the American people are feeling constant financial stress. That's not healthy. That's not good for marriages. And I think that's on the industry. The second thing is there's a term called rags to rags in 3 generations, and that basically says that those people who do have financial success, those wealthy families that do, their surveys say that 95% of those times that wealth disappears within 3 generations. So any of us who create wealth, it's gone with our grandkids, and that's not healthy. And then a third thing that goes on in this industry is that new people coming into the industry, out of every 100 who come in, 90% of them won't last 12 months. The remaining 10%, most of them are gone within 5 years. So if you have an industry with that kind of failure, how in the world can they expect that they do a good job in such an important subject? So those are 3 big challenges that we focus on, and we feel like we have created, over my 40 years, we've created systems and processes to address all of those challenges. Now, when you talk about the banking system, we're all used to a big problem we all have, and most people don't think about, is someone else controls the banking functions in our lives. Why do we go to banks? For checking, savings, and borrowing. But if we really look at it, and where the control option term came from, we all have the option to control more of our income and more of our assets. But unfortunately, in reality, the banks and the government control it. And that's why what we try to help people understand.
Okay, for instance, like let's just say a family wants to add a bathroom and it's going to cost $40,000. Most people would go to the bank to get a loan. But
right.
your thought is, why should a bank make money on your money? And why would control option be a better idea?
Well, because everything if you think about it, we finance everything we buy. Now, again, we finance everything we buy. Either we go borrow somebody else's money and pay interest, like with a bank, or we take our money and we give up the opportunity of making interest. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I said that?
Yeah.
So we finance everything we buy. So we can go to the banks and we can save our money there and make nothing, and we can go borrow our money back from the banks and pay a whole lot. With the privatized banking system, what Rich has been doing now, Rich, a decade or more? Mm-hmm. Rich can see where the money he saved, it's not investing, the money he saves, Rich is making a lot more on his money than the insurance company is charging him for their money. Why is that? Because Rich keeps piling money on top of money, never takes any of his out, so it gets uninterrupted tax-free compound growth. Meanwhile, he has money borrowed from the insurance company. He makes sure he pays at least the interest so it doesn't compound. So it's kind of I was a high school math teacher, so it's kind of simple math.
Yeah, it is.
Put money someplace where it compounds uninterrupted, tax-free, borrow money, and don't let that compound.
The bottom line becomes, if people are interested in the concept, they need to talk to you or one of your fellow finance people in order to understand it.
Yeah. And how do they do that real easy?
You always ask me that. That's not my detail.
But if you go to the Control Option website, it's very easy.
I got the number.
Coach has got it.
314-432-9540.
9540.
Yeah.
314. It's worth a phone call.
Yeah, Rich, do me a favor. Next time, remind me to have the phone number.
Yeah.
All right, let's get a couple of other sports thoughts. I was watching the Lakers last night, and they were eliminated by Minneapolis, I should say. No, Minnesota, yeah. And I cannot believe how bad a defender Luka Doncic is. Barkley had the line after the game, he could not guard a chair. But I also can't believe his body. That you're one of the greatest players in the world, the 5 greatest players in the world, and you are out of shape, and you've been that way from age 20 to 25 despite putting up all these great stats. It's amazing watching this guy.
So the question I had was, just for this year, not looking down the road, would the Lakers have been better off to keep Anthony Davis? Because, look what...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Look how they got somebody down low.
Look what Gobert did to him.
Yeah.
And Gobert is not a skilled athlete.
That's crazy you said that, but it's true because everybody says it's the worst trade in NBA history. But for just this
1 year,
you're right.
It may not have been.
Yeah.
I was watching something, Frank, that I thought of last night with J.J. Redick in his pregame press conference and then his postgame press conference, and I thought, God, maybe J.J.'s smart enough to create enough chaos, and then it come out later with a little locker room dysfunction that he gets fired and he gets all the years left in his contract and gets paid.
Yeah,
to get away from that.
Well, I again look at LeBron and look at Doncic. I mean, and the guy that got hurt by Doncic coming to the Lakers was Austin Reeves. He was not the same. He was really great. In fact, he's an Olympian.
Yeah,
he was an Olympian. The Lakers had 3 Olympians on their roster. And Austin Reeves, in my mind, was not the same player after Doncic came.
Yeah.
So, again, with keeping, not making that trade and keeping the big guy and Reeves being what he was before the trade, I think the Lakers would have been better off this year.
Yeah, they have no defensive presence on the block.
None.
And they tried to get Mark Williams from Charlotte, but it didn't work out because of a knee issue. But, boy, they're going to have to do some serious maneuvering in the offseason. All right, let's get a Cardinal thought. Mark, yesterday was a perfect day for the Cardinals. You had your two starting pitchers not give up a run, and then you had a stretch where you had 5 home runs in 2 innings. I know they're disappointing on the road, but, boy, you have a day like that, and you think, maybe there's hope.
Yeah, they're so close to being a pretty good team. Don't you feel that some days? And then other days they're hard to watch. I remember earlier before the season started, Frank, you made the comment if Gorman and Walker, they've got to have a good season. And Walker kind of started well, but neither of them are. So can the Cardinals, can they be a 500 team if those guys don't get better than they've been?
Mark, we've seen the Cardinals play Milwaukee, the Pirates, Cincinnati, and I think the analysis would be we're just as good as those. We are. Now, we haven't seen them play the Cubs yet. But I think we are very competitive in the
So,
league.
Rich, I have a really good buddy who's a big Cubs fan, and he pointed this out to me the other day, and I hadn't thought about it. First 26 games of the year, do you know who the Cubs played?
Oh, yeah. Dodgers, Padres.
And Arizona.
That's
20
right.
of the 26, and the other 6 were against 2 teams in the American League that have winning records.
Right.
Meanwhile, the Cardinals had played L.A., the Angels, Minnesota, and Pittsburgh. Those 3 teams are 37 and 54, and we didn't do that well. It would have been, couldn't they? We could have come out that first homestand 6-0. Didn't you think?
You're right.
And that would have really been nice. So I think that's going to the Cubs to me are the team.
And that's why that division title is what we have to aim for.
Oh,
we're not going to win a wild
absolutely.
card. We're not going to win a wild card. And the excitement of Mason Wynn and the excitement of Victor Scott, those 2 guys are so exciting to watch. And moving Wynn to that second spot in the batting order is a good move. I think Andy Van Slyke would tell you need speed up there. And now, he's much, much more active on the base pass than Contreras.
Have you noticed that the Cardinals have been right at the top in the batting average, but we're down the middle or low third in runs scored?
Yeah.
And so yesterday was very encouraging. How many did we hit yesterday? 5?
Well, we hit, I think, 6 total, but we had 5 if you combine the 9th inning to the first and second innings of games 2. And then you have 2 maybe stars emerging in Lars Nootbaar, and people think, what? No, if you look at his on-base percentage and his power as a leadoff hitter, his OPS, and then Brendan Donovan is an on-base machine, and Contreras is starting to hit.
Yeah. Look who we're not talking about, Arenado.
Yeah.
And Arenado, his offensive production needs to increase for 2 reasons. It'll help us, number 1, but number 2, it'll help us maybe move him at the trade deadline if he's having a good year. If he doesn't have a good year, there may be not any interest in, not that it's bad that we keep him, because I always believe Arenado will help our team, but he's got to start producing, I think.
Is it better now than you thought it would be? Are you satisfied?
Even though the record's under 500, just do have a kind of a good vibe because you have a Libator and Matz and Gray pitching well. I mean, that Libator thing, I always tell the stories that I always ask John Mozeliak, sometimes he's hit and run things, worst trade you ever made. And he says, I know you want me to say a Rosarina and Libator, but let's wait a few years. Well, you know what? 3 years from now, we may be saying that thing was a really good trade because he looks like Jerry Royce at times. I mean,
if Michaelis can just be okay, is there ever a day we go out there that we just think we have no shot? I mean, don't you feel pretty good each time with our starting pitching?
Yeah. It's been good. Yeah. How about baseball hero growing up? Now, you were up in South Dakota, but you came here.
I had a dad my dad was a Detroit Tiger fan.
So Al Kaline?
Al Kaline. But the big thing, I learned to read by reading the box scores. And so he worked, and the afternoon paper would come, and I'd get there, and I'm scouring it, and he'd, and I'd tell him, hey, Dick McAuliffe did this, Willie Horton did this, Al Kaline did this.
Norm Cash do,
Norm Cash, yeah.
So in '68, you were rooting for the Tigers.
Yeah, we were living in, I was in junior high in South Dakota, and that was a big deal, man.
Yeah.
Mickey Lolich went in 3 games in a series, and
5'11", 225, the donut salesman. So I bet you two had the exact same baseball hero.
Mine was Stan Musial.
Yeah, me. I was 9 in '63 when Musial had his last year. So.
Yeah. What was that like growing up watching him? I mean, I know you didn't see him.
Well, I mean, the fact that he was nicknamed the Man, I always looked at it, Stan the Man being such a good character person, such a good person off the field. And when I heard interviews from him, he was so polite and courteous to everyone. So beside his on-the-field production, his off-the-field persona was just attractive to me.
Yeah. The first Major League game I went to in Sportsman's Park, Musial came off the bench in the 10th, got a pinch hit single to win the game 8-7 against the Giants. Well, that summer, our Corey League baseball team won a tournament championship, and Musial was visiting up in our area, up near Hannibal, Missouri, and I got to be the guy on our team that handed the baseball to him and got him to sign it. I'll never forget that.
Well, I was at the game against the Giants where they played the doubleheader, and he hit 5 home runs.
Oh, you were at that?
Yeah, I was at the game with my dad.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember when ESPN had those sports centuries where they do a half hour on these great athletes? His was the only one that was boring, because there was no scandal at all. I mean, at the end of Larry Bird's, we had this daughter, Magic Johnson, the HIV, Michael Jordan, the gambling. Musials, there was no bite at the end. The guy just lived such a perfect life.
And that's what made him attractive. And he played the harmonica, which, again, was something that you don't see among sports heroes. But that's what made him attractive.
Yeah. How would you compare his career? I mean, if you look at the statistics, they don't really compare to Albert's.
No, they don't.
Albert blows him away.
Yeah, well, didn't Albert have maybe the best 10 years in history?
Yeah, Ted Williams, it's close, but yeah.
Well, but again, personality-wise, I take Stan over Albert.
Oh, no question. Yeah. All right, let's talk about the common denominator with you two, Norm Stewart. So you were with him for
13 years.
Yeah. How tough? I mean, you were a trusted lead assistant. How tough would he be on you? I'm wondering. Early in your career, maybe.
Oh, yeah, early. I was trying to learn how to be a coach, and he knew I wanted to be a coach, and he had a great staff. Gary Garner was on the first staff that I got there, and then Rich came in. That was huge for me. For 1 year, Rich was there, and
when he would jump you, how would that be? Give me an instance where he'd really get on you.
I don't know that I recall that much.
Really?
No. He'd get a little sarcastic about maybe it's not you're not cut out for this. Like he'd mutter to you when you walk by your little, because I had this little office at the time, and I'm a GA, and he did have a deal one time. Before cell phones, right? So I'm late for a Sunday practice, and he had moved the practice up. Well, I had gone up to Nebraska to the Missouri-Nebraska football game, and I was driving back, and so I had a bunch of high school friends up there, and they were going to the game. So I go up there, I go to the game, I come back. Well, I'm locked out of the locker room. He's in having a meeting. And I look at George Schultz, who was on the staff. He also was late. So he comes out, the guys go to practice. He says to me, hey, you need to think if you want to be a coach or not. I tell you what I want you to do. I want you to sit up in B section. I want you to take notes. And so I thought, okay, Sunday I'll go up, I take notes. George was writing his book at the time, Rich, and he told George, he said, you need to go concentrate and write on the book. And, Garner and Gene will take practice. So you talk about feeling like spanked, right? So I go up there. So then next day's Monday, and I come back, and I think I'll be on the floor. And he said, Bob, I'm serious. I want you to sit up there. You really need to take notes and see how we're doing. And I think you're going to learn a lot about how we're teaching and what we're doing. So I was up there probably 2 weeks. And then, honest to God, he calls me up. He says, come out to the house. Bring your notebook. Okay, so I bring my notebook that I've taken notes, and we go through it. And I was really sincere about my note-taking, and I was sincere about learning, and sincere about phrasing, and I was sincere about what we were doing, and it was fantastic. Now, I felt horrible, and I felt like an 8th grader, but it was really perfect.
My memories, first of all, Bob, I agree with you. Norm never berated me, never criticized. I mean, he was a perfect gentleman with his assistant coaches. That's my remembrance. But I also remember that, when I first got the job, I said, Norm, what do we do during the off season, during the summer? His answer was, we try to make money. That was his answer. And so, yeah. And he met with the camps and everything. We tried to figure out how we're going to make more money. And he would always come in, Bob. Remember, he'd come in with the financial tip of the day.
Yes.
He'd come in, it'd be right up your alley, Mark. He'd come in and say, here's the stock market tip of the day, or here's the financial tip of the day. As if we had any money to invest at that time.
He had a college classmate working in Kansas City that would call him every morning and give him an idea. I will tell you how great Rich was. Norm allowed Rich to put in an offense. You remember Rat? Huh? And we were running the triple post. We were running the triangle.
Really?
And it was grinding. And there's always a time in your season that you just can't quite get everything right. You know, even in football, you know, you're just not in sync and they've done it too long, whatever. So Rich comes in one morning. He goes, Coach, I got an idea. And I don't know, it was a simple, down screen, cross screen stuff.
Not complicated
motion.
at all.
And we called it Rat. And Norm let Rich put it in, and we went to it. And it was darn good stuff.
What was the dynamic like when John was there, and you're trying to coach up John, and you're his big brother, and did he listen to you, or what was that like? I know he's a respectful guy.
Yeah, but I didn't have to do a lot. I mean, when you're like the fourth guy on the staff, you're not doing a lot, you know. I mean, as far as coaching guys, and also with Norm, you're not doing a lot. He's coaching them all.
And this story, my family comes to watch practice one day, okay? And my kids are about 6, 7 years old. And so after practice, I come home, and Laura, my daughter, says, Dad, what does it mean in practice when you stand on the sideline with your arms folded? And I said, it means I'm not doing anything.
Well, Frank, Gary Garner worked for him for quite a while, too, and later on got the Drake job from there. In fact, did you come in when Gary left?
I took Gary Garner's place.
Yeah. So I'm up there, and I said to Gary in my second year, I go, okay, what do I do in practice? What do I do? I don't know. You know what? Clap your hands, scratch your arms, stay out of the way.
Yeah.
That was it. Well, the other deal was, Rich would have, and you would appreciate this, Frank, Stepanovich had an unbelievable work ethic. And we recognized it after when he was a freshman, that if we didn't have somebody on the floor when he came out for pre-practice, as Norm called it, which he wanted guys to come out and they'd do pre-practice, and somebody would get him and he'd do power moves, he'd do the mic and drill, he'd do whatever we had him doing, because that kid wanted to be in a full sweat by the time practice. So you had to kind of be alert, you know, on what players can do, and especially when you're the young guy. But yeah, I mean, we all had, you know, different roles as the time went on, but it was an interesting time to play.
How good was that team that lost to Elijah? Because that's them,
right?
Man,
I think
that was the team, wasn't it?
A crusher, and I mean,
was that Drew with?
No, it was Frazier and
it was
Frazier,
Frazier,
Kavner.
Steve, John.
Yeah.
But Greg Kavner had a tough day.
And then
Prince
Bridges
was
opposite John.
was a point guard.
But you know, if you look at the Houston team they had, how many great players.
Well, we didn't know how good Houston was at the time.
Drexler.
We had no idea because it wasn't televised, you know. I remember getting the film and we're looking, gee, this Elijah one's pretty good.
Yeah.
I think he even came off the bench.
Well, they had Drexler, Michael Young.
Alvin Shaw. Let's see. They had Alvin Franklin was their guard. Yes.
Bob, that was really a good 1-point game.
Yeah.
I mean, that went right to
St. Louis.
And I remember they had the big power forward Larry Michaud, and it was like, oh my God!
Wow.
You know, and I had to go by Norm's house the next day, Bob.
Yeah.
To tell him that I'm taking the job at SLU.
Oh yeah.
And you know, it was first of all he was so depressed about losing that because we thought we had the chance to get to the Final Four.
You did.
We did, and he was so depressed. And then when I told him I'm leaving, you know, he was even more depressed. And
but the team, though, when John was a freshman, John Sundvold, first-round draft pick, Larry Drew, first-round draft pick, Steve Stepanovich, first-round draft pick, Ricky Frazier, second-round pick, and Curtis Berry. I mean, that was an unbelievable team. Really, now, John wasn't quite as great as he'd become, but that was a heck of a team. So, all right, guys, really enjoyed it. Thanks so much.